Save. Verb. To deliver someone from danger or difficulty. The urge to save people might sound, by definition, like an unqualified social good. Of course, in countless cases, the impulse to assist individuals we perceive to be in some kind of trouble is a resoundingly positive one. But being human, that impulse can misfire. Maisie spots a man drowning. She dives in and drags him ashore, kicking and thrashing. He then tells her he wasn't drowning, but waving. Awkward. As onlookers to this incident, we might view it as a well-intentioned mistake and see the funny side. But then it happens to another swimmer, and another, and another. Each time the swimmer tells Maisie her intervention wasn't needed, but Maisie remains convinced that without her they would have perished. She dismisses their protests as face-saving delusions, and, swallowing the increasingly salty martyrdom she feels at their ingratitude, Maisie continues her redundant rescue campaign. It's as if she's on a pre-programmed mission, unable to register conflicting new intel and revise her course of action. The compulsion to rescue others is commonly known as a saviour complex. The word complex refers to a pervasive pattern of feelings, beliefs, perceptions, impulses, all based on a specific issue. With guilt complexes, this pattern centres around notions of personal blame. With superiority complexes, the pattern reinforces ideas about personal status and value. This pattern becomes the lens through which we view ourselves. Its distorted nature clouds our ability to process feedback from the environment. When reality conflicts with this lens, we bend and break reality to fit, inventing fallacious denials and rationalizations to erase facts and destroy context. This makes the complex maladaptive, i.e., it doesn't adapt adequately or appropriately to the situation, which is why, despite consistent evidence to the contrary, individuals like Maisie manage to maintain their heroic self-images. As I'll be exploring later with some real-life examples, there's no single path to a saviour complex. Like comic book superheroes, people with saviour complexes are an eclectic group with a vast variety of origin stories. The compulsions that drive saviour behaviour can take hold in childhood or in adulthood in response to transformative life experiences, from overcoming a major illness, to witnessing a grave injustice, to encountering an influential new social group. Saviour compulsions could be rooted in mainly individual or ideological factors, or a combination. Their targets could range from loved ones to the whole of humanity. But a common thread among all these saviours is a persistent failure to look closely at the people they plan to save and see them for who they are. One of the habits we slip into when we develop maladaptive saviour tendencies is infantilising people. We view them as less capable and aware than they are. And as we would with children, we start to impose our help on them without invitation or consultation. For the target, our unsolicited interventions can feel awkward, confusing, and alienating. In some cases, our help might get so smothering and invasive that it creates hefty additional obstacles for targets to overcome. Often, there wasn't even a problem to fix in the first place. We just invented it to satisfy our insatiable urge to help. Overcoming these maladaptive saviour compulsions is possible if we're willing to engage in some serious self-reflection. Unfortunately, we sometimes have to reach crisis point before we take even a sidelong glimpse at ourselves. We have to drive ourselves to exhaustion. Relationships and careers have to start crumbling and collapsing. Even when things are falling apart, it can be unthinkably tough to face the truth that for all the years we've been donning our gaudy superhero costumes, believing we were making a real difference, all we were actually doing was participating in an addictive form of bogus social interaction known as drama. We are a complex, multifaceted species, with a staggering potential for spontaneity, adaptability, and creativity, which is handy in view of our unfathomable individual variation. Each of us is born with our own unique combination of physical and psychological capacities, and thrust, with no roadmap, into our own distinctive social, cultural, and environmental conditions. In confronting the obstacles of our particular roll of the dice existence, from minor irritations to major disasters, we each have at our disposal a brain bursting with critical analytical potential. But often, instead of using these formidable faculties to figure out real practical solutions to our problems, we get sidetracked into an empty parody of problem solving called drama. Drama allows us to pretend we're tackling real issues when we're actually just indulging in self-affirming mind games. Drama brings out the worst in us, opening doors to our most controlling, coercive, dehumanising behaviour. When we develop powerful saviour tendencies, we seem drawn to the artificial glow of drama, like moths to a porch light. Steadfast in the belief we're fighting the good fight, we can drift into the most disturbing extremes without a moral twinge. I use the word drama in the social psychological sense, although there are parallels with the theatrical sense. In theatrical drama, scenes that appear spontaneous are in fact predefined. What seem like authentic interactions are built on illusion and misdirection. In social psychological drama, individuals also deliver performances based on deceptive, predefined roles. The actors on this dramatic stage typically fall into one of three interconnected positions. Together, these form what psychologist Stephen Cartman dubbed the drama triangle. First, there's the victim. In this dramatic role, we play the part of a powerless, injured party. We become passive and self-pitying, and, like children, we look to other people to rescue us. Confusingly, if we're offered real practical solutions, we'll often find ways to avoid, reject, or sabotage them. Real solutions generally involve taking adult responsibility for our own welfare, and drama-based victimhood is rooted in the rejection of responsibility. We're invested in the idea that our feelings, our experiences, our lives are determined by other people. Next, we have the persecutor, who looks for victims to harass, attack, and oppress. In this dramatic role, we become self-righteous and dictatorial. We might portray ourselves as purveyors of truth and justice, but we disregard the mechanisms that underpin these principles, like the burden of proof, due process, the presumption of innocence. Instead, we play judge, jury, and jailer in our own kangaroo courts. Like victims, we also dodge personal responsibility. If our own flaws and shortcomings are pointed out, we'll find ways to excuse, minimize, or deny them. Someone else is always to blame. Lastly, we come to the rescuer, who looks for victims to save. In this role, we take on too much responsibility by assuming the burden of other people's problems. On the surface, we might appear self-sacrificing. It can seem, to others and ourselves, like we're constantly putting our own needs behind the needs of others. In fact, our most dominant need is firmly stage front. As rescuers, our chief goal isn't to help others, it's to extract validation from them. Here we have the central self-deception of this dramatic role. Playing the rescuer is primarily about taking, not giving. This helps to explain why targets often come away from us feeling so drained. The specific type of validation we look for as rescuers can vary hugely. We might be after attention, admiration, control, social acceptance. If we have problems with guilt or shame, we might play the rescuer to gain self-worth. Our need for validation can also vary in intensity. The more intense it gets, the less room we have for competing needs, other people's or our own, and the more misguided and reckless our rescue attempts can become. So, we have three dramatic roles, all based in delusion and contradiction, each focused on seeking affirmation for its particular fantasy. It's no surprise that none of them do anything to help us work towards solutions. Instead, They just reinforce existing problems and generate new ones. When we think of saviour complexes, we might reasonably equate them with the rescuer position. In fact, saviours can occupy any of the dramatic roles. One of the things that makes drama such a slippery, tangled-up form of social interaction is that players can switch positions. Rescuers can become victims. Victims can become persecutors, and so on. These role shifts can occur suddenly, in response to a single incident that disrupts our perception of ourselves in relation to others, or they can be gradual, in response to an accumulation of experiences. An example of these dramatic shifts is illustrated in the story of someone I'll call Gordon. Gordon has a radioactive saviour streak. He's recruited by an ideological group that seems to share his outlook. In rescuer mode, Gordon approaches other individuals to recruit, but things don't go well. Some of his targets laugh at his ideas. Some angrily condemn them as corrupt and degrading. Some targets engage in polite discourse and offer thoughtful criticisms. The majority simply isn't interested. Something Gordon later came to appreciate was that people generally have their own concerns to deal with and don't have time for ideological sales pitches from strangers. But at the time, all these widely diverging reactions just blur into one big rejection. For Gordon, these encounters aren't about an exchange of ideas. They're geared to one outcome: recruitment. And all he takes away is that people wouldn't listen to him. He slips into a self-pitying victim position. Can't they see he's trying to help them? From his self-absorbed viewpoint, people seem deliberately, maliciously obstructive. As his ideas continue to get rebuffed, his despair hardens to contempt. Gradually, he drifts into the persecutor position. In his mind, if you're not on board with the group's ideas, you're an obstacle to salvation. He starts insulting anyone who isn't instantly receptive to his ideas. When people react with predictable hostility, Gordon takes their animosity as proof of their wicked nature. His negativity has become self-fulfilling. He actively creates enemies in the world, then complains the world is full of enemies. If you'd met him at this point, there would have been no hint of his idealistic beginnings. He had become an aggressive force for conflict and division. We might conclude that Gordon had now lost his saviour tendencies. In fact, Gordon reflected that it was during this period that he felt more heroic than ever. He was no longer fighting some abstract philosophy. He was in the trenches, pushing back against living, breathing adversaries. As Gordon's story illustrates, once we step onto the dramatic stage, we can't always tell where we'll end up. Drama is about the pursuit of emotional validation, unconstrained by reality. Without facts or context to guide us, it's easy to lose our bearings. What feel initially like noble intentions can steer us into monstrous actions. How do we step off this seductive stage? If we can bring our focus back to reality, we might be able to make the shift from a drama-prone saviour to a drama-free supporter. The crucial part of that shift is listening. Like many saviours, Gordon recalled that he always tended to skim the surface of what people said to him, looking for potential problems. As a result of not listening, he'd end up bending himself all out of shape, intervening in situations he'd completely misunderstood. A friend might be grumbling about a rough day at work. Suddenly, Gordon would be telling him to retrain for another job and spewing a stream of career ideas. Looking back on moments like these, Gordon realized how overbearing his behaviour used to be. He could see now that all his friend wanted was a bit of tea and sympathy. Drama feeds on misinterpretation. By helping to avoid misinterpretation, listening is a great preventative measure against drama. Being a supporter means encouraging people's own efforts to help themselves. When we constantly step in and take over, we push people towards dependence, passivity, unaccountability. In other words, a victim position. To promote the opposite qualities of self-reliance, proactivity, and responsibility, we have to stand back and let people work through their own problems with minimal intervention. Supporters acknowledge their own needs. Of course, there'll be moments in life when we put other people's needs first, sometimes to the extreme detriment of our own. But these moments are meant to be the exception, not the rule. Constantly neglecting ourselves is an unsustainable living strategy, and an irresponsible one. If our habitual self-neglect leads to severe problems, like health issues or financial troubles, we can end up becoming a significant burden on others. Putting our own needs first doesn't mean impinging on other people's needs. In fact, putting our own needs first leaves us better equipped for the times when other people really do need us. Leading on from that, supporters pursue their own full life. Saviours often have pretty empty lives. Is the emptiness a result of their constant heroics? Or do the heroics act as a distraction from a pre-existing emptiness? Either way, investing in our own lives helps prevent us from intruding in the lives of others. For individuals who manage to hang up their cape and let go of their saviour tendencies, there's sometimes a period of acute embarrassment when they reflect on their previous pseudo-heroic behaviour. I want to look at some real-life cases of people who weathered that embarrassment and began a new anti-drama life. I met the individual I'll call Tyrone at university during my psychology degree. We were assigned to the same tutorial group. These were small groups of 5 or 6 students who met every week, supervised by a course leader, to discuss course material and explore individual areas of interest. In our group, discussions were constantly derailed by Tyrone. I've often forgotten how disruptive he was, because after the first year, he transformed into a different person. Positive, reflective, a team player, and a real giggler. It's strange and sad to remember the closed-off individual we met in year 1, who exuded perpetual frustration. During that first year, Tyrone styled himself as a champion social educator, enlightening the ignorant masses. From our very first tutorial session, he was scrutinizing everyone's words for possible prejudicial content. Someone would be speaking, and he'd suddenly lurch forward and shout, "Hold on," and accuse the speaker of some social bias. These accusations would invariably prove to be unfounded. His standard charge was, "That's a stereotype." One of countless examples was when a group member I'll call Chaz was speaking about how caring her mother was. Tyrone cried stereotype and declared that Chaz was perpetuating the idea that women have to be nurturing. Furthermore, by implication, she was perpetuating the idea that men didn't have to be nurturing. This was his typical tactic. He would fallaciously extrapolate gigantic through lines from a single innocent instance. This allowed him to invent a continual stream of transgressions to protest against. Sometimes, after shouting, "Hold on," Tyrone would pause for a moment, then back down. He'd explain that he thought the speaker was about to say something prejudiced. He'd then allow the speaker to continue. Evidently, he had constant negative expectations of bias from us. His consistent failure to find those biases did nothing to persuade him of their non-existence. For Tyrone, absence of evidence was evidence of hidden presence. Tyrone's behaviour was so outlandish that after a few weeks, a member of the group I'll call Yanni suggested it must be some kind of psychology experiment. He said Tyrone had to be a plant. No one behaved like this in real life. A sheepish smile on Tyrone's face was all the confirmation the group needed. People laughed and told him what a convincing jerk he'd been. Eventually, the tutor, Bob, gingerly intervened and said it wasn't an experiment. Tyrone was for real. Let's just say the rest of that session was a little tense. And it was a turning point. Up until then, Tyrone had monopolised the group's attention very successfully. After that, there was a steep decline in patience. Group members stopped enabling his interruptions. We'd carry on speaking. It didn't stop his accusations, but he did learn to wait his turn. Tyrone's relentless misinterpretations of our words were a constant invitation to conflict and drama. For the most part, group members brushed his comments off. The predominant feeling towards him was second-hand embarrassment. He was like a child in a newspaper cape, waiting to be told what a brave hero he was. But one member, a Scottish nurse I'll call June, was more direct. One week, June was recounting a family event up in Glasgow. When she mentioned that she'd had to order cabs for several family members who were too drunk to drive, Tyrone sailed into action, crying "stereotype," and told her she was perpetuating the idea that all Scottish people were alcoholics. June joked that most of her relatives were alcoholics, but Tyrone wouldn't let it lie. He started pseudo-psychoanalyzing her. He suggested that she'd heard these Scottish stereotypes so many times, she had absorbed them and developed some kind of self-loathing. He used words like unconscious and internalized, and spoke with breathtaking condescension. Eventually, June snapped and bluntly told him where to go. That moment would set the tone for their entire relationship. Whenever he tried to target her, she'd swiftly shut him down with some colourful response. For a time, he tried to play the wounded party. At one point, he called on Bob to tell June she couldn't speak to him that way, in effect, inviting Bob to play the rescuer. Bob declined. Instead, he imparted some friendly advice. If you don't want to get stung, don't poke the beehive. It was a simple, practical solution, and Tyrone completely ignored it. For the rest of the year, he continued to poke the beehive and flip-flop between persecutor and victim. At the time, we found his masochism baffling. Why choose to keep getting stung? But we were applying rationality to drama. For masochism to persist, there has to be some payoff. For Tyrone, these stings gave him a sense of heroic martyrdom. He was being attacked for his principles. During that first year, the one time Tyrone showed genuine humility was when one of his grandstanding rescue attempts blew up in his face. We were all sharing memories of our primary schools. Chaz commented that it was weird having to sing Christian hymns in the morning assemblies. Tyrone flew to her aid, declaring her school to be racist. Chaz disagreed, but Tyrone persisted. He said with her being Indian, they should have been more sensitive. She might have been a Hindu, or a Sikh, or a Buddhist. Chaz laughed and said, "I'm not Indian." Tyrone's face turned the colour of a London bus. Having spewed non-stop false allegations of ignorance against everyone else, he was now caught in a very public moment of genuine ignorance. After pausing to let Tyrone respond, an opportunity he declined, Chaz moved on, without comment or drama, picking up where she'd left off after his interjection. Tyrone was mute for the rest of the session, and barely spoke for the next few weeks. There was nothing showy or dramatic about his silence. For the first time, he seemed genuinely uncomfortable with attention. Although the lure of drama gradually took hold again and the accusations started creeping back, it was a welcome glimpse of authenticity, one that would later expand beyond anyone's expectations. In the second year, Tyrone returned to the group a changed man. The old air of restless frustration was gone. He was open, relaxed, and engaged. He listened without prejudice, and he revealed the most amazing Michael Fassbender smile, a smile that would become my abiding image of him, clouding out that rocky first year. Some weeks into the term, he told me that over the summer he'd gotten into a relationship. One weekend, his girlfriend had some friends around. To her mortification, Tyrone donned his social educator mask and pulled them to pieces. After they left, she delivered some devastating home truths. She said Tyrone pretended to be this amazing, sensitive, compassionate person, but actually he treated people like trash. He looked for the meanest possible interpretation of people's words, just to make himself look good. She said he was a hypocrite and a fraud. It hit him where he lived. He was a hypocrite, especially in the old sense of the word, an actor playing a role. He wanted to look cool, to be admired. At school, he'd got some positive attention from students and teachers for speaking out against stereotypes. It became his thing. Sadly, it went to a dark place. It became all about getting admiration, not tackling real prejudice. He became a social vampire. People became things to feed on. Tyrone's girlfriend was the first person in a long time whose feelings he really cared about. She meant the world to him, and her rebuke was the kick he needed to sort himself out. As the second year progressed, the group dived deep into subjects like prejudice and discrimination. Some of us shared some related real-life experiences of being shunned and abused by families and communities. Tyrone said it was an eye-opener. He'd had no idea what we'd been through. He cringed at how he had presumed to educate us about the nature of prejudice and all its depth and subtleties, when all the time we'd lived it. We just didn't feel the need to constantly bring it up when it had no relevance. Tyrone privately apologized to each member of the group for his previous behaviour. But one member, June, always kept her distance. Tyrone lamented that he really blew it with her, but he said that it was a useful reminder that in life you can't always mend what you break. Sometimes, when I get cynical about people's ability to change, I remember Tyrone's transformation and his incredible smile. I want to end with the stories of two individual clients with saviour complexes who both came to therapy in a state of collapsed victimhood. Dimmy was a personal trainer who'd lost a number of long-term clients he said had gone out of his way to help. Marion had been volunteering on the phones at a helpline charity for some years until a few days ago when she said she'd been forced out. They both portrayed themselves as big-hearted fools in a heartless world, but their casual disregard for personal boundaries hinted at a different picture. Dimmy would quiz me intrusively about my health and fitness, and give unsolicited tips on everything from specific exercises to food to sleeping patterns. He'd often follow up later, wanting to know if I'd taken his advice. When he didn't get an affirmative answer, he was visibly irked. Marion was a habitual space invader, constantly touching me, sometimes in very intimate areas. When I withdrew from her touch, she'd often try to re-establish it. She described herself as an obligate empath. She explained this meant she couldn't help picking up other people's thoughts and feelings. As she recounted her experiences volunteering at the helpline, she would repeatedly preempt my reactions. Ah, now you're thinking X. Ah, now you're thinking Y. Her guesses were consistently wrong, and she made no attempt to verify them with me. Dimmy and Marion had both become so absorbed in their own fantasy image, they'd lost sight of how they came across to others. Gently challenging their self-perceptions with empathy exercises helped to reboot their social awareness. Slowly, they began to see how their superhero costumes looked from the outside. When clients start to realize their own behavior might be the principal source of their problems, there's often a sequence of specific responses. They defend their actions, then regret them, then understand them, and finally make peace with them. This sequence isn't set in stone. A client might become stuck in one stage for a while, or flip back and forward between stages. In the defend stage, we're not ready to see the negative impact of our behaviour. We move into regret as reality sinks in. Our feelings of regret might range from mild to intensely painful. For a time, we might obsess over a particular incident or feel overwhelmed by multiple incidents. That can start to shift when we begin to understand our behaviour, to see where it came from, what prompted it, what needs we were trying to serve. Finally, in the peacemaking stage, our feelings about the past resolve and subside. As Dimmy and Marion moved through these stages, their true stories unfolded. Marion had a turbulent early life, moving from place to place because of her parents' work. She learned to make friends fast by being useful, helpful. It became her identity. She was the one people turned to with their problems. In adult life, she began to think about a career in counselling and decided to test the water by volunteering at a helpline charity. She found it deeply rewarding, but the lines began to blur. Marion had no off switch. She'd lose herself in the stories of her callers, who played incessantly on her mind. She was soon juggling multiple weekly shifts, prompting jokes that she lived at the call centre. But for Marion, it was becoming a substitute home. She even bought a stack of mugs with hearts printed on them to replace the old ones in the kitchen. Boundaries with colleagues also began to dissolve. Marion styled herself as an old mother hen, dispensing relentless guidance. Casual conversations became advice clinics. When volunteers took difficult calls, she'd swoop in, imposing maternal hugs. Underpinning her increasingly smothering behaviour was Marion's growing conviction that she could read people's minds. Within the mental health field, this is recognised as a classic sign of burnout. Practitioners come to believe they've seen it all before and stop checking their assumptions. Things came to a head one week after a new volunteer took a distressing call. When Marion flung herself on him, he fended her off. She was shocked at the rejection. The following week, she confronted him about the brush-off and asked him who taught him to reject love. When he dismissed the question, she became more insistent, delivering a forceful speech about how he was pushing his feelings down and how he shouldn't be trying to help others if he wasn't willing to work on himself. She'd later feel the irony of those words. Her tirade disrupted the calls of her colleagues, who reported it to management. It wasn't the first complaint, and she was suspended pending an investigation. It was a body blow. Marion saw herself as an untouchable authority figure. To be subjected to disciplinary procedure sparked pure rage. She drove to the call centre after hours, smashed all her heart mugs, and piled them on a table next to her resignation letter. Within a week, she was begging to come back. When the charity refused, she came to therapy, playing the victim. In her sessions, Marion realised how disconnected she'd become from people. She cringed at how she'd bullied the new volunteer after his distressing call. What a horrible start for him. She conceded the helpline wasn't where she should be. Marion came to understand the origins of her compulsion to help. It had been a survival tactic, a way to quickly anchor herself in new company. She worked on forging healthier anchors. In our time together, I watched her blossom in authenticity as she shook off her dramatic role-based identity. Like Marion, Dimmy had become an overbearing presence at work. For years, he'd built a great reputation at his gym, but in recent months, he'd alienated some long-term clients with accusations of lack of commitment and inappropriate comments about their personal relationships. When we looked at what was going on in Dimmy's own relationships, He revealed that he'd recently become estranged from his family following some explosive exchanges. One of his brothers had announced that he and his wife were emigrating to her native Norway. Dimmy objected and tried to stop the move. For Dimmy, family was everything. After their father died, he'd worked hard to keep everyone together. He'd helped his brothers find homes near their mother's house so they could all live close together, spend weekends together, go on family holidays together. When partners started coming along, it hadn't been easy to make them understand how Dimmy wanted things done, but eventually they'd settled into his routines. Now, his brother's move threatened to destroy everything. Dimmy started having nightmares about the end of the world. He began showing up at his brother's house, making scenes, and accusing his sister-in-law of tearing the family apart. Family members who tried to reason with him were accused of disloyalty. Eventually, his mother stepped in and told him everyone was sick of his controlling behaviour. Things were going to have to change. For Dimmy, it was the ultimate betrayal. He stopped speaking to everyone. In therapy, Dimmy saw that everything was tied up with his father's death. When Dimmy was 10, his father became terminally ill with cancer. Dimmy became the hero child, helping and protecting his family. This was reinforced by his dying father, who told Dimmy he was in charge now. He told him family was everything in life and made Dimmy promise to keep everyone together. For over 20 years, Dimmy had been working to keep that promise. In the early years, he'd been an extremely positive force in the family, helping his mother and protecting and encouraging his brothers. But over time, like other saviours who try to preserve people in a timeless bubble, he'd become oppressive and dictatorial. Dimmy came to understand that it wasn't his role to take charge and keep everyone together. Letting go of his father's promise was an emotional experience for him. But he conceded his brothers weren't children anymore. They had their own lives to lead. Despite the conflict of recent months, there was enough love in Dimmy's family to start over. And Dimmy was there to wave his brother goodbye. Helping is about identifying and addressing the legitimate needs of a situation. When those things aren't done, then whatever we think we're doing, we're not helping. And we might be straying into a parody of problem solving called drama. It can be tough to give up the self-affirming illusions drama offers us, and we can drift into some ugly, harmful behaviour. When someone's stuck in a dramatic role, they have to want to get out of it themselves. Attempts by others to coax them off the dramatic stage will often be twisted into more drama. But as the stories of Dimmy, Marion, Tyrone, and Gordon show, all hope is not lost when saviours go bad.